5C confidence intervals, our maximum 5C.1 is I can identify the 95% confidence interval for a sample population by calculating, for sample proportion, I should say, by calculating the margin of error. Okay? So you know what most of those words mean. So the first thing we have is the sample proportion. As we do the problem, this is really easy. So we get a proportion when we ask like a yes or no question, or like not even really just a yes or no question, but when we have so many people answer, right? If I said how many people have dogs as a pet, right, and 400 out of 500 people responded they have a dog, 4/5 would be our sample proportion. Okay, so it's how many people responded positively. The fraction of positive responses over total responses. So it's kind of like probability, right? But we use sample proportion for what we call qualitative data. It's not a number, right? If I ask you how old you are, you give me a number. What'd you score on this test? That's quantitative. Qualitative is like, do you own a dog? Right, like, what are some other things? What color are you wearing? Right, all those are just qualitative, so they're not numbers. So that's when we use sample proportions. Okay, we represent the sample proportion by this symbol. I'm really just putting it in parentheses. I'll write it without parentheses. It's literally called p hat because that little symbol is its hat. So not super complicated. We call this p hat, so it represents your sample proportion. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is the margin of error. And the margin of error is the maximum expected difference between the true population parameter and the sample statistic. So this really occurs, the most common form of this is when you watch the news during any election. All right, they'll say 40% plus or minus 2. All right, you're going to vote for this candidate. They'll be like, we might be off a little bit. That's their margin of error. Like, we think it's going to be 42, but it could be anywhere around there, really. Okay? So that's this margin of error. And for a margin of error from a sample population, we do a specific formula. We're going to be doing a 95% always. So that does influence our margin of error. So it's 1.96 times p hat times 1 minus the square root of p hat times 1 minus p hat all over n. Okay. Where p hat, again, is your sample proportion. And n it's like any of these places. N equals your sample size. Okay. The only thing that changes ever is this 1.96. So we're using 1.96 because we're specifically doing a 95% margin of error. If I want to be more exact, I wanted a 99% margin of error, so that means I'm 99% sure versus 95% sure. This number will get bigger, meaning you'll have a bigger margin of error. If you're like, I don't care, I only want to be 10% sure, this number gets way smaller, right? So that changes. In this class, we're only dealing with the 95%, so it will always use that 1.96. Okay. If you go on to take like AP stats, you'll learn more about why we use what numbers. Okay. Okay, and then we want to look at, after that, once we have our margin of error, we can find our confidence interval. And again, we're going to be specifically doing a 95% confidence interval. And it is used to express the degree of uncertainty with a sample statistic. So our 95% confidence interval, how we find that is we do p hat minus our margin of error, less than or equal to what we call p, no hat on that p, less than or equal to p hat plus the margin of error. Okay, so what does this mean? Again, p hat equals your sample statistic, or your sample proportion and P equals your population proportion. Okay, so again, this is that, like, when you watch any news during any election, right, 42% plus or minus 2, right? This is that plus or minus, right? It could be 2 above, it could be 2% below. And that's all this is what it truly is between, right, taking away the margin of error and adding the margin of error. Okay? So yeah, this is the sample you take, and this is like what you think it truly, right, if I asked the whole population what that proportion would be. Okay? So let's look at an example. Okay? Our first example doesn't have context to it, right? We're saying the sample proportion is 38%. That means what we call that p hat is 0.38. And for a sample of 650, so our n, our sample size, is 650. So our margin of error equals 1.96 times, right, p hat, 1 minus p hat over n, equals 1.96 times the square root of, well, p hat is 0.38, 1 minus 0.38 over 650. Okay? And I'm just going to type that whole thing into my calculator. So we had 1.96. Again, your square root is here. So you hit on the handheld calculators, it's yellow. Control, and then the x squared, because you can see the square root symbol above it. The way I like to do it is hit Control divide, and it will pop up that fraction bar. We have 0.38, and then 1 minus 0.38 divided by 650. Okay, and we get this string of numbers, and we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So 2 decimal places, so we're going to round up to 0.04. So this is our margin of error. looking at number B, letter B. The confidence interval, remember, is p hat minus your margin of error. So less than or equal to p, which is less than or equal to p hat plus your margin of error. Again, you're subtracting and you're adding. So that's going to be 0.38 minus 0.04. 0.38 minus this, right, is 0.34. So we're reasonably certain that our actual proportion is going to fall between 34 and 42%. Okay? The last thing we have to do is what is the meaning of the interval. This is so important. Star it, circle it, highlight it, anything and everything. This is the part most people get incorrect because it's a weird thing and it's not quite how we think. A lot of people, doing everything, a lot of people want to write that we are 95% confident our proportion falls between 34 and 42, and that's wrong. Okay? But the confidence interval means is in 95% of all samples, meaning if I resampled my population, I randomly sampled my population 100 times, 95% of those, so 95 of them, the proportion, between right? We're ignoring this. Right? In 95% of all samples, so that's very key. And then whatever it is, this one's just the proportion because we don't have context, but in context, right, we have to say whatever that is, will be between 34% and 42%. So again, if I took 100 different samples of 650, so I chose 650 random people and asked them a question. Then I said, okay, you're free. And I chose a different 650 people. And then I chose a different 650 people. I do that 100 times. And 95% of them will fall between these two numbers. Okay, so that's what your confidence interval is. All right, let's look at our next example. Oops. Come on, it doesn't want to erase. There we go. Okay. Example 2. In a simple random sample of 500 people, 342 are reported using social networking sites on the internet. What is the sample proportion? Okay, so we're finding p hat. 342 had favorable responses. They'd be like, yes, I am using social networking. Out of 500. When we divide that, we get 171 out of 250, but we're going to put it as a decimal, and we're going to say it's 0.68. Alright, so I'm just using my calculator. I'm also here going to put what n is. N is always just what you're dividing by, right? That's my total number of people. Equals 500. So, margin of error. 9.6. This is another formula you have to have memorized. So writing it on every problem will help you remember it, right? P hat is 0.68. 1 minus 0.68 over n, which is 500. Okay. And so then, again, we're just typing that in our calculator. And we get about, again, we get about 0.04. To save time, I'm not going to pull it back up, but if you have any questions on what calculator buttons to hit, let me know. Then, 95% confidence interval, right? P hat minus your margin of error is less than or equal to P, which is less than or equal to P hat, plus your margin of error. So 0.68 minus 0.04. 0.68 plus 0.04 is 6. And that's 0.68 minus 0.04 is 0.64 and 0.72. So this was asking if people use social networking sites on the internet, right? So then for my confidence interval for this one, what is the meaning of the interval in terms of social network use? Right, in 95% of samples, what do we have here? 64% to 72% of people will use social networking sites. And so that's what that confidence interval means. All right, last question. In 2001, a Gallup poll surveyed 1,016 households in the U.S. about their pets. All right, of those surveyed, 599 said they had at least one dog or cat as a pet. So again, we're finding P hat, which is 599 divided by 1,000, which equals 0.59 approximately. Sorry, divided by 1,016. Struggling. So 0.59. Margin of error, 1.96, square root P hat, 1 minus P hat, 1.96, square root, our P hat is 0.59. N, what's N, right? 1,016, the total number of people we asked. Sorry about that. When I type that in my calculator, we get 0.03. What is our confidence interval? P hat minus your margin of error is less than or equal to P, which is less than or equal to P hat, plus your margin of error. P hat is 0.59 minus 0.03. 0.59 plus 0.03. 0.59 minus 0.03 is 0.56. And then plus is 0.62. What is the meaning? In 95% of samples, 56% to 62% of people will have a dog or a cat. And that is it. I will see you guys Monday.